Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are back for part 3 of the Casey Anthony documentary that I watched so that you don't have to. Sorry, I'm going to be laying down for this one. I actually watched this again and started to make these last night, but my stomach got really upset. I ate some bacon and eggs for dinner last night, and it just did not sit well with me, and I have been just laying around all day. I have not felt good at all. So, episode 3 of the Casey Anthony documentary. Let's get into that. So, episode 3, I'm going to sum this shit up really quick because honestly, I don't want to give her and her bullshit honestly too much of a thought because this episode was hands down the most infuriating of the 3. This is the episode that they claimed would prove Casey's innocence, that would cause you to doubt things and all of that. Well, it didn't cause me to doubt shit. The only thing that it made me doubt was that they didn't pull George's cell phone records to exclude him. And that's it. And that's not me doubting anything. That's just shitty detective work. And honestly, probably part of the reason that she was acquitted. Not because George's cell phone records were necessarily going to show anything, but like we've talked about before, and we talked about at the end of the Roden case, that had Jake, in that particular case, had Jake not confessed and they not had the murder weapons, they would have had to go through a list of potential things that could have happened. The cartel, the sheriff who later was indicted and sent to prison for something else, another local drug dealer, Skip Montgomery, allegedly, that Billy had claimed was involved. By Jake giving them the murder weapon, they were able to not have to pursue all of those things, not just to prove that George did it, but to exclude other theories that the defense was going to bring up. So in the case of Casey Anthony, by not pulling George's cell phone records and not excluding George, her father, as a potential suspect, they left that wide open for Jose Baez to come in there and make the case that Casey's father was involved one way or the other, that he knew more than he was saying, and that he was throwing his daughter under the bus to protect himself for the wrongdoings that he had done. Now, does that make it right? Absolutely not. Is that any kind of reasonable doubt? In my opinion, no. But by the law and the way that it was written, and they were charging her with a death penalty eligible level of murder, it did not fit the definition because they did not outwardly prove that. They left room for Jose Baez to come in and put in reasonable doubt to the jury. Head over to part 2. We're going to start summing this up and we'll get this one wrapped up. Casey Anthony, episode 3, part 2. Let's go. So, honestly, I don't remember the exact order that this episode went in. We again went into all kinds of detail about how Casey was essayed by her father, allegedly, and allegedly also by her brother, that then turned and testified for the defense, which wonder how he was feeling about that. And that had to have been before she threw him under the bus saying that he assaulted her. So anyway, Casey ultimately starts blubbering approximately 87 times during this episode. All of them are fake crocodile tears. I only saw some real ones. Maybe two, 3 times max. So Casey starts getting all anxious saying, I don't want to talk about it today because she knows, that you're going to ask to this producer, which this producer is the most useless producer of an interview I've ever seen in my life. Not a single pushback question, nothing. Not only that, but at one point, this producer, and make sure they add this, by the way, goes out of her way to explain to her boyfriend's roommate at the time who was being interviewed, saying that she killed this baby. He's talked to George. He knows what happened. He's the one that came up with the Zany the Nanny thing. And she says, well, did you know that he was sexually abusing her? And that when you're sexually abused, that abuser can have a mental hold on you? And this guy suddenly, his opinion has changed? What? He said that, that makes things make so much more sense now, knowing that. I'm sorry, sir. What rock have you been living under that you didn't hear this story that Casey spun to the news and anybody who would listen for 3 years about her father abusing her? So anyway, useless producer aside, she does ultimately go into what she said happened to Kaylee, which is all a complete fucking lie and exaggeration at best, or downplaying at best, and a bold-faced lie, if anything other than that. We've already gone over what she said that she thought happened to Kaylee, that George had caused this. But then we start going down a different road where they start feeding Casey pieces of interviews and things that are just confirming this belief that Casey has, that her father that George was repeating the abuse cycle with Kaylee. So she then talks about the sweet sweat, which was taken from something that George said at Kaylee's funeral. She said she's never watched it. So naturally the producer decides, oh shit, yeah, we're going to make you watch that funeral. Head to part 3. Casey Anthony, episode 3, part 4. 4. Maybe 3. I don't know what part we're on. So this is actually towards the end of the episode when she does this. But Casey sits down in this projector room and she's watching interviews with her parents, talking about how they're lying and that her family, just sucks and everything. You can't believe anything that comes out of her mouth. And honestly, this entire episode is just, sorry, my sock's falling off. This entire episode is just absolutely infuriating because it's just her talking about herself. And you can't imagine what this did to me. I wouldn't wish this trial on my worst enemy. It was awful for me. Jail was awful for me. All of these things, my life was ruined. I lost everything. I lost this. I was this. Never fucking once do you hear about the loss that was of poor little Kaylee. That Kaylee had everything taken from her, and everything that she would have done, could have done, and could have been to other people taken from her by her mother. She takes the producers on a drive about of a couple of the scenes, talking about the Zanny the nanny bullshit again, and about how she lied about that, the boyfriend, and, she was going out all the time. She was lying about the nightlife jobs that she had because she was working as a contractor for Universal Studios, not Universal itself. When her job ended, she was getting jobs as like a bartender, things like that, to make money in cash so that she could make her getaway, so that she could move out and be done, because she said for a blissful short amount of time, it was only her mother, and Kaylee living at the house because her mother had kicked George out of the house for a while. She said it was the first time in her life she felt safe, that things were great, whatever, but then her dad came back. That's when she started saying that she was saving up money to get out, to move out, to be out on her own, but she wasn't telling anybody about it. So that's why she was lying about the Universal thing. But the fact is, she went so far as to make like fake emails that she would then email herself from those emails to make it look like she was working, so her parents wouldn't get mad when they had to watch Kaylee, so that she could go out and work at her nightlife job. Naturally, that was left out of the documentary, but that's what happened. Casey talks about how she had these suspicions that the same thing that had happened to her was happening to Kaylee at the hands of her father and Kaylee's grandfather. She seems to have this confirmed to her watching the funeral video, which is a pretty sad thought. And if that was true, I'm sure that was devastating to watch. But we don't know if that's true. We never will know if that's true. She also says that she begged her mother for a private funeral, not the big public mess that it was. And her mother did not do that and did everything she did for money. Casey Anthony, episode 3. This is part 4. The previous one where I was confused was part 3. So as we all know, ultimately Casey was acquitted of this crime, which, while I do not agree with that verdict, in its truthfulness, I kind of agree with that verdict in the case that it was given. I do not think that the prosecution did a very good job of proving their case, and I think they left a lot open for a good defense attorney like Jose Baez was to come in and implant reasonable doubt in the jury. Which, I finally remembered why I know Jose Baez's name. I don't know who was first or whatever with the order of things, but the reason that I've heard his name before is because he was Aaron Hernandez's attorney. He was also Harvey Weinstein's attorney, but he was Aaron Hernandez's attorney. And I have such a fascination with the whole Aaron Hernandez thing. That is so sad and so messed up. And football injuries 100% contributed to that. Whether it caused it, I don't think so. But I do think it contributed to a lot of the downfall of Aaron Hernandez. And there's a really good series that is done by the doctor who got to study Aaron Hernandez's brain after he unalived himself in prison. And it's really, really good. You should look that up. Anyway, side note. So ultimately, we find out George was the main witness for the grand jury that was presented to the grand jury by the state for the charges of murder against Casey. Casey apparently found that out while filming this, which, how did you not know that? That was public fucking knowledge for the last 11 years, and you're trying to tell me you didn't know? Okay. Casey's ultimately presented with the damning evidence. I keep doing this, I'm sorry. The damning evidence of the computer searches that were done at 2:51 p.m. on the day that they were conducted. I don't remember. She ultimately blames her father, said her father had to be at work at 3, but him searching for foolproof suffocation at 2:51 still allowed him time to get to work. He lived close enough. He could have left work and come home. And the prosecution and the state never pulled his cell phone pings to see whether that was true or not. But they did pull Casey's, and Casey was home the entire day. She claims that even though her account was password protected and while in prison, she had to give both her brother and her parents her username and password on the video chats that were recorded. She claims that everybody knew everybody's passwords because it was a family computer. Which, I mean, I had a family computer once too, and I understand there's some shit you don't want to search while somebody's home that they can stand over your shoulder and look at. Go to the next part. Casey Anthony, episode 3, part 5, hopefully the last part. So Casey also makes a point of pointing out that the way that Kaylee was disposed of was extremely similar to the way that her father had buried their family dogs, wrapped in a blanket, wrapped in a trash bag that was duct taped. Why do you bury your family dogs like that? That's my pressing question in this whole thing is, why are you burying your dogs duct taped in a plastic bag? During the trial, this is when her brother Lee also came and testified for the defense, saying that he had seen her father bury the family dogs in this same manner that Kaylee was buried, which, okay. But arguably, you could say that this, if Lee saw it, Casey probably was aware of it or saw it as well. And maybe this is the only way she knew how to bury something. I mean, unless you're having like a full-on funeral and something. If I had to bury something, I would, probably do it the way that like you bury your pet when they die. I mean, it's the only time you deal with death that's not, pretty heavily regulated by a coroner or a funeral home or something. So jumping around, once she is acquitted, we do find out that her defense team rented a house up in the Panhandle and took her on vacation, basically, to get the hell out of Dodge. They all went on vacation together, for lack of a better term. They all cooped up in some big-ass house up in the Panhandle and went on vacation to get away from the media. Her attorney, who is like a father to her now, he says that he never asked her what happened. Towards the end, they talk about it, but you don't really learn anything new. She says their same old bullshit. He talks about how Casey's part of his family, that he loves her like a daughter, which, is sweet and all, but like, that's your misfortune. Casey also is shown and watches a lot of the interviews that her parents gave to like Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, all these other ones after her acquittal for money. And she says that she's disgusted that her family would do that. Again, this entire episode and this entire series is Casey talking about how terrible this was for her, how hard this was for her. This is hard. I've lost everything. My life is ruined. Blah, blah, blah. Never mind your fucking daughter. Like, you're not sad that you lost your fucking daughter. You're sad that your life got ruined. And that's what's disgusting about it. So in a nutshell, that's the documentary. It ends on a stupid note of her and her bullshit again. I'm honestly not giving this another minute of my time. I was so infuriated by this episode. Casey Anthony is 100% guilty. If you think she's not, you are absolutely delusional. This woman killed or contributed to the death of her child. Period. End of story. End of documentary. Thank you guys so much. I hope you love this series. We'll see you at the next